Southeast Asian cinema, a label of power or controversy. While the debate around it remains ongoing, ultimately it's not to be answered without complications. One approach to exploring the topic is through the lens of an auteur, a filmmaker whose personal influence and artistic control over a movie are so significant that the filmmaker is regarded as the author itself. In this instance, we'll be looking at Joko Anwar and his contributions to Indonesian cinema through the influence of the exploitation film era and exemplified through his modern work in Pedagor. Through this relationship, it is evident that Indonesian exploitation cinema is a unique cultural export that contributes to the weight and significance of Southeast Asian cinema overall. But first, what is exploitation cinema? Having existed adjacent to mainstream Hollywood while maintaining its own tropes and traditions, exploitation cinema has a rich history since its inception. However, defining exactly what exploitation cinema is can sometimes be easier said than done. Encompassing many genres that can't necessarily be examined under one singular umbrella, the entity of exploitation films is really best described as, you know it when you see it. However, there are some commonalities that can help us make this identification. Exploitation films rely on controversial and explicit themes that push the boundaries of what is deemed acceptable to portray. To execute this, they rely on a low budget, quick production time, and distribution methods designed to maximize profit with as little investment as possible. These B-grade termed films also share a lack of originality, or to put it another way, an excessive dependency on trends for financial success. To truly begin to understand the world of exploitation cinema, it helps to be familiar with one of the common mottos of those who study it. When one exploitation film finds success, many more just like it will follow. Looking at this with Indonesia in mind, we are met with the question of how has exploitation cinema given weight to the term Southeast Asian cinema, and how has its influence impacted modern genres? In Indonesia, the 80s were the golden age of their exploitation era. Taking filmmaking tactics and styles they had seen in the West, Indonesian filmmakers leaned heavily into their own cultures and styles to make exploitation their own. Western exploitation films tended to exist on the fringes of society, always punishing those who indulged in the world of sin and vice with a wink and a nod. Indonesian exploitation instead sought to tell stories that, while outlandish and extreme, always paid reverence to their culture and rewarded the hero who exemplified their country's ideals. For reference, Indonesian exploitation films produced under the New Order regime positioned their villains and criminals as symbols of the Suharto government. During this time, nobody dared to voice their differences or criticize the government without fear of being silenced or disappearing. Nowadays, the Indonesian people have more freedom to express their opinion, although it may be different from or even against the government. One director who is deeply influenced by this era is Joko Anwar. Best known for his dedicated work in horror, Joko makes it clear where he owes most of his inspiration. He states, "My second film, Kala, was actually my love letter to exploitation cinema from the 70s and 80s in Indonesia. I remember going together with my neighbors, my friends, and my family. It was the best time of my life." With this in consideration, let's look into his most recent film, Empedagore, to further explore the genre's impact on Joko's definition of horror, as well as the concept of Indonesian exploitation cinema as a unique cultural export that contributes to the significance of the Southeast Asian cinema label. Empedagore tells the story of Maya, a financially struggling woman who grew up as an orphan. Tired of working vulnerable jobs that barely help her get by, she jumps at the opportunity to claim a potential inheritance from her mysterious family. Accompanied by her best friend, they journey together to the rural village where they are soon met with the true and gruesome intentions of the community. Up to this point, it is already obvious that extreme violence and gore are a central stylistic theme. At surface level, it is assumed that any horror of this type would rely on it. However, its nature holds additional relevance within Joko's films. Because of traditional belief systems, coexistence of the physical and spiritual realm is accepted as a reality, articulating the scare factor as not just the violence itself, but the spiritual vengeance as a result of violent deaths and injustice in the physical world. Within the context of exploitation, this factor of cultural reverence is fundamental in separating Indonesian exploitation from Western versions of the genre, where portrayal of extremes is not just for the sake of controversial content, but takes into account historical hierarchies and traditionalism to construct an art form of cultural pride. We can parallel this concept with the film Jaka Sambung, a sprawling martial arts saga filled with blood, guts, and plenty of bad acting. Barry Prima plays the titular character who is a freedom fighter for Indonesia. Jaka Sambung is a story of a patriot who stands up for his country and leads the charge against the Dutch colonialists and their hired assassins, some of whom have magic powers that allow them to have their limbs chopped off and then immediately regrown. Regardless of the absurdity of this graphic violence, there is an undercurrent of cultural pride and reverence for tradition. Between severed heads, rabid fetuses, and fatal martial arts battles, the world of Indonesian exploitation cinema is not for the weak of heart. That being said, Indonesia is not a weak-hearted nation. The vast community formed from this outlandish genre is a cultural phenomenon that shouldn't be overlooked, and the undeniable artistic impact it inspired as well as its success as a cultural export deserves proper credit. Going back to our initial inquiry concerning the Southeast Asian cinema label, you might be disappointed that there still isn't an exact answer. Yes, Southeast is still far too broad of a label to articulate the range of diverse and complex cinema that spans the nations within. However, erasing Southeast completely would actually be counterproductive, as it is an essential distinction within the grand categorization of Asian cinema that would ultimately be resorted to. While specifically from Indonesia, the exploitation art form is still uniquely Southeast. Supported by a discussion of cultural reverence and odes to traditionalism within the genre, the production and market potential of this type of exploitation within Thailand, Vietnam, or other nations of the region would be equally feasible, whereas renditions of the genre within distinctly East Asian nations such as China or Japan would look extremely different, if even present at all. Whether it's due to their developing film industries or historical relationship with colonialism and imperialism, Southeast Asian films embody the spirit and heart of the region they come from. Indonesian exploitation showed an entire new generation of Southeast Asian filmmakers that they didn't need an enormous budget or extensive experience to find cinematic success. The work of auteurs such as Joko Anwar, inspired by Indonesian exploitation, has given filmmakers from Southeast Asia a template to forge their own paths and establish their mark on the world. This film is dedicated from Nagas Productions to Ari Purnama. Terima kasih banyak atas bimbingan semuanya.